We all have that one song, the track you blasted in your car, with the windows rolled all the way down, completely oblivious to what you were actually singing. The 1970s was the undisputed golden age of the Trojan Horse hit. These were upbeat, radio-friendly anthems hiding themes of murder, severe addiction, and political subversion right in plain sight. What if I told you that one of the era's biggest pop-punk hits was written by a victim to mock her real-life stalker? Or that the ultimate American freedom anthem was actually a desperate suicide pact? You are going to look at your record collection entirely differently today. We are ripping the mask off the decade's most celebrated tracks. Some songs become hits, others become something else entirely. Number 10, One Way or Another by Blondie. There is a relentless energy to this track, a driving, almost predatory bounce that made it a staple of late 70s radio. On the surface, it sounds like a fierce, romantic pursuit. A woman playfully declaring that she will win the object of her affection, no matter what it takes. But here is the strange part. It was never a love song. It was a survival tactic. In the years leading up to the song's release in 1978, Debbie Harry was being hunted. An ex-boyfriend had become obsessively fixated on her. He was armed and he was relentless. He camped outside her residence in New Jersey day and night, a constant, looming threat that eventually forced her to abandon her home entirely and flee. Imagine the sheer terror of that situation. The constant looking over your shoulder. The paralyzing fear of being watched. Instead of cowering in the shadows, she flipped the narrative, she wrote the song from the exact point of view of the predator. She took his sick obsession and mocked it, turning it into a massive pop-punk anthem to regain her own psychological power. And if you listen closely to the music itself, you can hear the anxiety. That abrasive guitar riff played by Chris Stein. It was specifically engineered to sound like a wailing warning alarm. It is the sound of approaching danger. People danced to it in clubs. Teenagers sang it into their hairbrushes. They had no idea they were singing the diary of a stalker. Sometimes the most effective armor against real-world trauma is a bulletproof pop melody. Number 9. I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats. It is a phrase we have all muttered at the start of a long week. A universal complaint. When this bouncy, piano-driven anthem hit the airwaves in 1979, listeners naturally assumed it was just a relatable expression of workplace dread. It sounds so grand, so theatrical and triumphant. Here is what most people do not realize. The title is a direct, word-for-word quote from a 16-year-old school shooter. Bob Geldof was in the middle of a radio interview in Atlanta when the station's telex machine began clattering away. It was a breaking news report. A teenager named Brenda Ann Spencer had just opened fire on a San Diego elementary school across the street from her house. When a reporter finally got her on the telephone and asked why she did it, her response was terrifyingly casual. She said she just did not like Mondays, that it livened up the day. The sheer apathy of that statement struck Geldof with such force that he went back to his hotel room and wrote the song that exact same afternoon. It was a massive success overseas, spending 4 weeks at number 1 in the United Kingdom. But in America, fear took over. Radio stations heavily boycotted the track, terrified of the massive listener backlash that would come from broadcasting a song about a domestic tragedy. Number 8, Copacabana by Barry Manilow. There is an irresistible disco pulse to this track. Bright horns, sweeping strings, and a bouncy piano riff that screams pure 1978 nightlife joy. But beneath the sparkling surface lies one of the darkest stories ever disguised as a dance floor hit. For millions of listeners, Copacabana was the ultimate party anthem, a glittering celebration of glamour and New York nights. But beneath the sparkling surface lies a bittersweet story of love, jealousy, and heartbreak. The song tells the story of Lola, a beautiful showgirl, and her lover Tony, a bartender at the famous Copacabana Club. They shared passionate nights and wild dreams in the heart of disco-era Manhattan. But one night, a wealthy man named Rico tried to come between them. A heated argument broke out, and everything changed. Tony suddenly disappeared from Lola's life. What makes the song brilliant is how Barry Manilow tells this emotional story using the catchiest, most upbeat melody possible. The chorus at the Copacabana sounds like pure happiness, even as the lyrics speak of love, lost, and lonely nights. In the final verse, years later, Lola is still at the club, holding onto memories, still waiting for the man she loved. Manilow created a perfect Trojan Horse, a deeply emotional story wrapped in the happiest disco sound of 1978. People danced and sang along, often unaware they were sharing a tale of love, loss, and longing. Sometimes the brightest melodies carry the deepest emotions. Number 7. Excitable Boy by Warren Zevon. Listen to the opening piano chords of this 1978 track. It sounds like a sunny, carefree afternoon in Southern California. The groove is pure doo-wop revival, but pay attention to the story being told. A calm, deadpan narrator is detailing the horrific crimes of a deeply unhinged young man at a high school prom. Warren Zevon was a master of the macabre. He looked around at the sanitized, feel-good singer-songwriter movement dominating the late 70s and decided to set a bomb off in the middle of it. He wanted to satirize the way polite high society often excuses violent, sociopathic behavior in privileged, wealthy youth by simply brushing them off as excitable. To make the joke land even harder, he brought in rock royalty. Those cheery, upbeat background vocals, they belong to Linda Ronstadt and Jennifer Warnes. They are cheerfully singing along to absolute atrocities. It is a profoundly disturbing juxtaposition. And it worked perfectly. It went completely over the heads of listeners who were just tapping their feet to the rhythm. The most subversive artists know exactly how to use our own comfort against us. Number 6. Have you ever seen The Rain by Creedence Clearwater Revival? There are songs you recognize in seconds, heavily tied to a specific cultural moment. For generations of fans, this acoustic-driven staple from 1970 was understood to be a political protest, a weary commentary on bombs dropping from the sky during the Vietnam War. It fit the mood of the country perfectly. But that interpretation was entirely wrong. The weather was not a military strike. It was a family falling apart. John Fogerty wrote the track while in a state of severe, crippling depression. Creedence Clearwater Revival was at the absolute peak of their global fame. They were selling out arenas and dominating the FM dial. But behind closed doors, the resentment was suffocating. The weather phenomenon he describes, sun shining while a storm rages, was his personal metaphor for this exact paradox. He was watching his relationship with his brother, Tom Fogerty, completely dissolve right before his eyes. Tom would actually quit the group shortly after the album was released. Think about that for a second. This was the band's 8th gold-selling single. Their commercial dominance was firmly cemented in American culture. Yet, the man writing the hits was utterly miserable. It perfectly captures the cruel irony of achieving your ultimate dream, only to realize the success is destroying the people you love most. It turns out the heaviest storms are often the ones breaking inside our own homes. Number 5. Don't Fear, the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. Sometimes a song hits the cultural nerve so hard that the public completely rewrites its meaning. When this haunting track hit the airwaves in 1976, it caused a widespread moral panic. Angry parents in religious groups accused the band of promoting a teenage murder-suicide pact. They pointed to the themes as dangerous propaganda aimed at vulnerable youth. The truth was profoundly different. Guitarist Buck Dharma wrote the song after a sudden, severe health scare forced him to confront his own mortality at a very young age. He was not trying to romanticize the end of life. He was trying to find peace with it. He leaned on classical literary imagery to express a simple, comforting idea that true love transcends the physical barrier of death. It was meant to be a reassurance, not a threat. And then there is the production. The track's driving rhythm is famously anchored by a cowbell, a musical choice so heavily parodied today that it has become its own cultural touchstone. But here's what most people don't realize. That instrument was not even played by a member of the band. It was struck by their producer, David Lucas, who just felt the track needed something extra. A misunderstood lyric and a studio afterthought accidentally propelled a hard rock band to absolute mainstream immortality. True artistry rarely cares about our misinterpretations. Number 4, Imagine by John Lennon. If you attend a graduation, a memorial, or a global sporting event, you are likely to hear this melody. It is universally celebrated as a gentle, comforting anthem of peace and global unity. But John Lennon himself was remarkably blunt about what the track actually was. He openly admitted that the song was essentially a radical, anti-capitalist manifesto. He just decided to disguise it as a lullaby. Lennon drew heavy conceptual inspiration from a book of poetry written by Yoko Ono back in 1964. He took those concepts and crafted a lyric that was explicitly anti-religious, anti-nationalistic, and deeply anti-conventional. He knew that if he shouted those ideas over a distortion pedal, the establishment would shut him down immediately. But because he sugar-coated the message with beautiful cascading piano chords, it was welcomed right into the mainstream. He even enlisted producer Phil Spector to help construct the trap. Spector intentionally bathed Lennon's raw, working-class vocals in a lush, echoing reverb. This production choice made the radical themes sound dreamlike and entirely non-threatening. It was a brilliant act of musical espionage. He proved that the single most effective way to sneak a revolutionary idea into the living rooms of millions of Americans is to simply make them hum along to it first. The sweetest melodies often hide the sharpest teeth. That ability to Trojan Horse a heavy message inside an irresistible groove reached its absolute peak in the early 70s. Number 3, Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones. From the very first second the needle hits the vinyl, you are hooked. It is widely considered one of the most beloved, danceable guitar riffs in rock history. A staple of stadium tours and FM radio. Yet, the lyrics attached to that undeniable groove vividly and graphically describe the horrific, violent realities of the transatlantic slave trade. Mick Jagger scribbled the words down in a notebook in just 45 minutes. He was out in the Australian desert filming a movie, actively mashing together the most extremely taboo subjects he could think of. The goal was to be deliberately provocative, and the sound of the record only amplified that raw nerve. The band tracked the song over just 3 days in December of 1969 at the historic Muscle Shoals Sound Studio in Alabama. They captured a gritty, spontaneous energy that would completely define their dominance in the decade to come. But time has a way of shifting our perspective. In recent years, the band has quietly retired the song from their live set lists. They finally acknowledged that the lyrical content is just too shocking for modern crowds to sing along, too without consequence. It highlights a wild, unfiltered era of rock and roll where the sheer unbridled power of a groove could completely blind millions of listeners to the deeply offensive nature of the words. A great rhythm can make us forgive almost anything. Number 2, Only the Good Die Young by Billy Joel Sometimes. A song does not need a deeply profound message to cause a massive cultural uproar. When this piano-driven staple dropped in 1977, religious groups immediately mobilized against it. They demanded it be banned from the airwaves, accusing the artist of launching a deeply theological, anti-Catholic attack. But the truth is almost comical. There was no grand philosophical critique. It is just a remarkably catchy story about a frustrated teenager trying to convince a religious girl to give up her virginity. Billy Joel wrote it about a real-life high school crush named Virginia. Interestingly, he originally composed the entire thing as an upbeat reggae track. It wasn't until his drummer stepped in and convinced him to switch the tempo to a driving rock shuffle that the song finally found its identity. They even added a distinct aggressive handclap rhythm on the backbeat. That specific production choice was designed to give a primarily acoustic-driven song a heavy stadium rock punch. And that punch landed perfectly. When a Catholic diocese in New Jersey publicly demanded local radio stations pull the song from rotation, the resulting controversy acted like gasoline on a fire. Record sales immediately skyrocketed. People who had never even heard of the track rushed out to buy it, just to see what the outrage was all about. It brilliantly demonstrated how pearl-clutching censorship almost always backfires. The quickest way to make a teenager listen to a record is to tell them it is forbidden. Number 1, Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. There are songs that define a summer, and then there are songs that define the very idea of America. For nearly 50 years, this track has been universally adopted as the definitive fist-pumping anthem of open highways and boundless freedom. It is the song you play when you are young and feel invincible. But strip away the soaring saxophone and the thunderous drums, and you will find a story completely devoid of hope. It details a desperate, near-suicidal pact to escape a town that is literally killing the characters. Behind the scenes, Bruce Springsteen was fighting for his professional life. He spent 6 agonizing months recording this one song. His record label had laid down a brutal ultimatum: produce a hit or face being dropped entirely from the roster. Under that crushing weight, he wrote about a protagonist who is not celebrating a carefree joyride down the coast. He is terrified. He is declaring to his partner that they must get out of their death trap of a hometown tonight, even if it means dying in the attempt. There is no guarantee of survival, only the absolute certainty that staying means fading away into nothing. To convey that overwhelming, suffocating weight of desperation, the production had to be massive. They layered up to a dozen individual guitar tracks over each other in the studio. They were desperately attempting to recreate Phil Spector's famous wall of sound, building an impenetrable wall of noise that mirrored the claustrophobia of the lyrics. And that is where everything changes. That massive, overwhelming wall of sound completely masked the tragedy written on the lyric sheet. It is the perfect Trojan horse of the classic rock era. It has successfully tricked multiple generations into passionately celebrating a story about absolute despair. But perhaps that is the true brilliance of the record. By wrapping such a bleak, terrifying narrative in the most triumphant, explosive melody of the decade, it allows the listener to feel the exact fleeting rush of freedom those doomed characters were so desperately chasing. We get to feel the victory they never actually achieved. These tracks prove a fundamental reality about how we consume art. Human nature loves a beautiful melody far more than an uncomfortable truth. For 50 years, we have rolled the windows down and happily danced to desperation. We have sung along to profound sorrow. We have tapped our feet to pure madness. And we did it all simply because the rhythm was just too good to resist. It forces you to look back at the soundtrack of your own life and wonder what other secrets are hiding inside the choruses you know by heart. Because some songs become hits, but others define an entire moment.